When the Anderson family got a new dog, they had little to no doubt about which one, as they immediately fell head over heels in love with a particular puppy's ocean blue eyes. But maybe they shouldn't have been so eager, as they didn't just adopt any ordinary dog. But they only find that out when their vet calls the police on them. The poor family unknowingly got a lot more than they bargained for. Billy and Erica weren't sure what to think. The vet didn't speak a word to them when he took their dog away. What was going on? Could this maybe have something to do with the weird behavior they experienced last night? Or was there something else going on? Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. The vet returns to the waiting room 10 minutes later. But there was something different. Blue was nowhere to be seen. Before they could even question where he was, the vet informed them that he had just called the police and that they were on their way. Billy and Erica were stumped. Little Tim was crying at this point, screaming that he wanted his dog back. But when the vet started explaining himself, it suddenly started to make sense to the couple. How could they have been so naive? But to better understand this situation, a bit of backstory is required. The Andersons were a young family living in Vermont. Billy, Erica, and their 4-year-old son Tim lived together in a small town. Recently in the Anderson home, there had been a lot of sadness. They had to move to a new town without knowing much about it. But there was another reason for this sadness. The young family had recently lost a dear member, one that had been a part of the family for 11 years, their family pet, Rio. Rio was not merely a pet, but a long-standing member of the family. You see, Rio was the first friend Billy made when he ran away from home at 16. Billy's home situation had been less than pleasant. His parents were verbally and emotionally abusive, constantly monitoring his actions to the point where he was restricted from making friends. Billy often fantasized about a world outside of the grasp of his parents, so much so that once he got out, the first thing he did was buy a dog. For the first 2 years, it was Billy and Rio, best friends forever. The young man struggled to find his ground when he was on his own, but luckily, having a loyal friend through it all eased the pain. Rio was there for all of the monumental moments in Billy's life, including his first date with Erica and the birth of their newest family member, Tim. Rio was a special part of their family life, and just as he had been there for Billy, he was also very close to their young son, Tim. Now that Rio was gone, it was clear that things were no longer the same. The family was unmistakably sad, but they already had a feeling as to how they would fix it. "Let's get another dog!" Even as he said it, Billy had to admit he wasn't sure about his plan. Erica shook her head. She knew it was far too soon to be getting a new pet. Rio had meant a lot to her husband and Tim, so much so that she was a little surprised he wanted to replace the dog so soon. However, there was a dog-shaped hole in their life that needed filling. Erica and Billy talked about it a few more times. Erica was concerned that Billy was jumping into things a bit too quickly, but he was trying to convince his wife that he was ready for the change. Eventually, Billy won Erica over, and the two decided they would get a dog. But the hurdles had just begun. The first hurdle the family faced was choosing the next breed. But they eventually decided on a husky because it would be easier for Tim to adjust to, as Rio had been a husky as well. Next, the family searched the web for a licensed breeder, as Tim wanted a puppy as soon as possible. The couple was unfamiliar with the breeding world and felt the internet would offer the most options. After much searching, they found 2 husky breeders. The couple decided to make it a weekend trip and scheduled visits with both breeders. However, the trip would turn out to be a little disappointing for the family. The first breeder gave off the wrong vibe from the start. Although the puppies were cute and Tim and Erica had a lovely time playing with them, Billy couldn't fight the weird feeling the location gave him. It seemed like the dogs were living in uncomfortable conditions. Secondly, the cost seemed questionable too. The young family had little luck with the second shop either. While this breeder was cleaner and seemed to take better care of its puppies, the couple was greeted with some sad news on arrival. They had sold the very last 2 puppies online. Now Erica and Billy were stumped. The entire family was sad once more. They felt disheartened that their whole trip had turned out to be a bust. Billy and Erica decided it would be best to get home and figure out a new plan. However, they changed their plan underway because the couple spotted an animal shelter 15 minutes into their drive. Would this be destiny? Erica was ecstatic. She had begun to lose hope when she spotted the small shelter on the side of the road. Turning to Billy, she pleaded with him to stop and have a look inside. Something told her they would find what they were looking for there. The young family decided it couldn't hurt to check it out. The shelter was located next to a small city, so they didn't expect to find much of a selection. And they were proven right. The shelter attendant explained they only had 5 dogs available and only 2 of them were puppies. However, one dog in particular immediately caught their eye. It was one of the puppies. And as little Tim exclaimed, it was clear that the little boy had the same thought as his mother. The puppy looked like a husky, or at the very least, like one of its parents was a husky. However, the most fascinating thing about the animal was its eyes. They were starling blue eyes that neither one had ever seen on a dog. The dog was timid and smiled while keeping its distance. It was unlike the other dogs that danced and hopped, hoping to get some attention. Instead, the little puppy stared on high alert at the door. The employee explained that the dog had been left at their door just the night before and was still getting familiar with the space. More so, since it was so new and had been left with no identification, they knew very little about the puppy, other than the fact that it wasn't chipped. The Andersons wanted the puppy, but there were some hiccups. However, the employee stated that the shelter usually only let animals go after verifying their identity first. However, it was a small town and an even smaller shelter that had not seen an animal being adopted in many months. Because of that, the employees made an exception for the young family. But would they come to regret it? The couple was overjoyed and headed in to sign the necessary paperwork. It seemed far too much like fate to let the puppy go. While Billy and Erica signed the papers, young Tim played with the new member of their family, who was now slowly getting used to the young boy's advances. It took about an hour for all the paperwork to be signed and recorded. After that, the young family finally returned home with their new pet. Everyone was excited, especially Tim, who had already made a new best friend. Unfortunately, this feeling would not last long for the family. Soon, a great revelation would be stealing their newfound joy. One of the conditions for taking the puppy home was a promise to get the dog a complete checkup at the vet for health reasons, as the shelter had not had the chance to do so. Little did they know what the visit would lead to. The vet had an opening that same day for the family to bring their new dog in, which Tim fittingly named Blue. But sadly, the family had no time. So they decided to plan an appointment for the next day. They wanted to introduce Blue to his new home first. Blue seemed to be beaming with excitement and energy when they got home. He immediately started inspecting every corner of the house and playing with his toys. He eventually ended up in his dog bed, where he quickly fell asleep. It had been a long day for him, so he was very tired. The family had already fallen head over heels in love with their new addition to the family, and they were so happy they stopped at the shelter. Otherwise, they would have never met this beautiful little puppy. They could watch this little angel sleep for hours. But there was so much they did not know yet. Soon after, the family also went to bed themselves. Blue had already been solidly asleep for an hour, so they felt comfortable leaving him to himself for the night. This day had been as exciting for them as for Blue, and they had an early appointment with the vet the next day. The family was happier than they had been in a while. They thought they had found their perfect replacement for Rio, even though he could never fully be replaced. This dog came very close. But sadly, this happiness would not last as long as they had hoped. Not even close. That night around 2 o'clock, they were awoken by a loud howling sound from downstairs. Billy was startled by this and had to compose himself for a second. Still rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, Billy made his way downstairs to check on Blue. But what he was about to see caught him by surprise. Blue was no longer in his sleeping place when Billy came downstairs. He had made his way to Billy's PC and sat down next to it. Billy was incredibly confused by this behavior. Neither Rio nor any other dog he had heard of ever reacted like this to a PC. Blue stopped howling when Billy picked him up, took him away from the laptop, and returned him to his sleeping place. He didn't put up much of a fight. Too tired to address this, Billy closed the office door and went back upstairs. Luckily, he didn't hear any more howling for the rest of the night. The next day, the family found Blue sleeping against Billy's office door. They had no idea how long he had been there or why he was doing this. It was obvious Blue was attracted to the PC, even when he could not see it. But why? Could he sense it somehow? But the family had barely any time to think of an explanation for this strange behavior, as they had an appointment at their vet in an hour. They had to hurry to even make the appointment. They got themselves ready and hopped in the car. Blue still seemed very tired for some reason. The plan was to leave Tim at home for this, as they would most likely be in the waiting room for a while. But Tim was not going to let Blue out of his sight, so all three of them went together. They would, however, soon wish that Billy went alone for this. When they got to the vet, it was already crazy busy at this early hour, so they had to wait a little longer than anticipated. The waiting room was also quite full, and Blue was drawing a lot of attention, mainly because of his piercing blue eyes. Everyone was very intrigued. Nobody had seen a pup with blue eyes like this before, and everyone asked the family many questions. Billy could answer very few of them, as he still needed to do more research himself. This made him wonder why Blue had these brightly colored eyes. Could it be something dangerous? Because it was so busy at the vet, the family had some time to kill. They used this time to search the internet for more information about the husky breed. Sadly for them, there wasn't much they could find online. Apparently, it was even rarer than they had first anticipated. The only logical explanation they could find was fairly uninteresting. Apparently, it could be caused by cells being unable to create pigment, which was rare but possible. Maybe the vet could tell them more about it when it was their turn to be seen. If only they knew what was about to happen. The dog had also caught the attention of the veterinarian's receptionist, and when she noticed everyone's interest in him, she immediately called the vet. At first, he didn't understand why everyone found this dog so special, but after explaining the situation, he had her postpone his next appointments a bit, moving the Jeffersons up. A few moments later, the vet walked into the waiting room himself, barely speaking a word, only informing the Jeffersons it was their turn and to wait here. Billy was surprised, but also happy, as he didn't think they would be helped for at least an hour. Why did they move them up the list? The vet picked up Blue, quickly inspected the excited puppy, and then took him into his office. Billy was confused, as he expected they would join him in the office to keep Blue distracted while he did some tests. That is how he did it with Rio at the time. The family waited patiently for the vet to return, which he did 10 minutes later. But there was something different about him. He didn't have Blue with him. Before they could even ask any questions, the vet ushers the family into a different room. Here he explained the whole situation. He told the family he had informed the police and they would soon be here to pick up Blue. Billy and Erica were stumped by this. They asked the vet why he would do something like this without talking to them first. Little Tim didn't understand the situation at all, and he started crying his eyes out, screaming that he wanted his dog back. The vet then explained the whole situation to Billy and Erica. Apparently, a few days ago, a report went out about a missing dog belonging to a wealthy unnamed tech CEO, and Blue fit the description perfectly. The CEO was also offering a big reward for finding his special puppy. The vet continued to explain to the family they were not in any trouble, but he had called the police as a precaution. He feared the family would run as soon as he told them because they already loved the dog so deeply. Billy and Erica understood his fears because they did feel very protective of their pup already. The CEO arrived together with the police about 30 minutes later, and they sat down with the family. He proved to them that the puppy belonged to him and explained that the dog wasn't chipped because he had simply not gotten around to doing it yet. Billy and Erica sighed. There was no way around this. The fact that Blue seemed so attracted to PCs made sense now they knew his history. He had always been around them in the CEO's office as he had spent most of his days there. So he probably recognized and reacted to it because it felt familiar to him. What an intelligent dog. The family could do nothing else than agree with the CEO to take his dog back, much to Tim's disappointment. He was very little and didn't understand why Blue had to go away. He didn't care that the CEO was the puppy's owner. He still saw Blue as his dog. Luckily, there was also some good news. As the vet mentioned, a reward was also associated with finding the puppy, and the CEO happily made it all out to the family. Plus, he would allow them to see North, which was Blue's actual name, anytime they wanted. And Billy already knew where he would spend the reward on. The family eventually adopted another husky puppy a few weeks later. They used the CEO's money to get a more expensive one from which they knew it had been raised correctly and was thoroughly checked. They quickly started to love this new puppy just as much as Blue, and everybody ended up happy.